If your surname is on this list, you are not just English by heritage. You are connected to a specific duchy across a specific stretch of grey water, a specific fleet that sailed in the autumn of 1066, a specific grant of stolen land, and in most cases, a specific family that took an entire country in a single afternoon and then spent 20 years making sure it could never be taken back. 12 surnames, 12 bloodlines, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly where yours stands in the most complete conquest in English history. Stay until number 1, because that name sits on the most famous document of the entire conquest, and historians have known for 400 years that the document is a forgery. Number 12, Beaumont, from the Old French Beaumont, the beautiful hill, a name that sounds like a view from a terrace. The Beaumont were among the greatest of the Norman houses, and Roger de Beaumont was one of William's closest counselors, an older man who stayed behind to help govern Normandy while the fleet sailed. His son Robert fought at Hastings on the 14th of October 1066 and was rewarded with vast estates. The family became Earls of Leicester and Earls of Warwick. Here is what people miss about the conquest. It was not a raid. Within 20 years, the entire English landholding class had been erased and replaced. By 1086, almost the whole of England was held by roughly 1,400 people, and nearly all of them were Normans, Bretons, and Flemings. If your name is Beaumont, your bloodline came from the beautiful hill in Normandy, and took an entire kingdom's worth of English land as payment. The next surname belongs to a man who was a bishop, who was forbidden by his office to shed blood, and who therefore rode into the battle swinging a club instead of a sword. Number 11, Bayeux, and the names that came out of Kent with it. From the town in Normandy, Roman Bayeuxi. Odo of Bayeux was William's half-brother, made Bishop of Bayeux at around 14 years old, and one of the very few men whose presence at Hastings is genuinely proven rather than claimed. He is on the Bayeux tapestry, which his own household almost certainly commissioned, shown rallying the young knights. He was made Earl of Kent, and became one of the 2 or 3 richest men in England, and then he overreached, and William imprisoned his own brother for 5 years. He was only released when William lay dying in 1087, and even then, reluctantly. If your name traces back to Odo's Kentish men, your bloodline served a warrior bishop who took an earldom and then found out that in this family, blood bought you nothing at all. Number 10 sits beside the king himself on the most famous embroidery in the world. Number 10, Mortain, and the Cornish houses beneath it. From the town of Mortain in Normandy. Robert, Count of Mortain, was William's other half-brother, and unlike Odo, he kept his head down and kept everything. He is one of the 15 men whose presence at Hastings can actually be proven. He is on the Bayeux tapestry, seated at the table next to King William. He became Earl of Cornwall, and the Domesday Book of 1086 records him as one of the very greatest landholders in the entire kingdom, hundreds upon hundreds of manors. He was given the Rape of Pevensey in Sussex, one of the strips of coastal territory the Normans carved out specifically so that the road back to Normandy could never be cut. If your name comes from Mortain's honor, your bloodline held the beachhead and never let go of it. Number 9 is a Breton name, not a Norman one, and the man who carried it was given the north of England because the north of England had just been destroyed. Number 9, Rufus, and the Breton houses of Richmond. Alan Rufus, Alan the Red, was a Breton, the son of a Count of Penthièvre. Not every man in William's army was Norman. Bretons and Flemings sailed too, and they were paid in the same currency, other people's land. Alan was granted what became the honour of Richmond in Yorkshire, and he built a castle there whose keep still stands. And here is why he needed a castle. In the winter of 1069 and 1070, after the North rebelled, William conducted what is called the Harrying of the North. He burned it. Villages, seed grain, livestock, systematically, across Yorkshire and beyond. 17 years later, the Domesday clerks were still writing a single word beside estate after Northern estate, waste. Some readings of those entries suggest a catastrophic share of the northern population died or fled. If your name traces to Richmond's Breton lords, your bloodline was handed a wasteland and told to hold it. The next surname belonged to the man William trusted with the body of the dead English king, and with the most dangerous city in the north. Number 8. Mallet, from the Old French, a diminutive of mal, or from the word for a mallet, the hammer. William Mallet of Graville is one of the small number of men a contemporary chronicler, William of Poitiers, actually names as present at Hastings. He was made High Sheriff of Yorkshire in 1068, and the story recorded is that after the battle, it was Mallet who was given the task of dealing with the body of King Harold. He held York in the years when York was the most rebellious place in England, and he died around 1071 in the Fenlands, in the long, grinding suppression of the last English resistance. If your name is Mallet, your bloodline handled the corpse of the last Anglo-Saxon king, and then spent the rest of its life holding down the country that mourned him. Number 7 carries a name that means, simply, the son of somebody, and that grammar is the fingerprint of the entire conquest. Number 7. Fitzgerald, Fitzwilliam, Fitzroy, and every name that begins with Fitz, from the Norman French fils, son of, itself from the Latin filius. Turstyn Fitzrolf is another of the tiny group of proven companions at Hastings, and by some accounts he carried the papal banner into the battle. But look at what the word does. Every Fitz surname in the English-speaking world is a fossil of Norman French sitting inside the English language, the same way the words beef, pork, justice, prison, court, and castle are. The peasants kept the Anglo-Saxon animals, cow, pig, sheep. The lords ate the Norman meat, beef, pork, mutton. The language itself records who was in the hall and who was in the field. If your name begins with Fitz, your bloodline is a piece of Norman French grammar that has been embedded in England for 960 years. Before we continue, if you are finding this useful, subscribe to Origins Decoded. Every week we uncover the history hidden inside surnames, bloodlines, and family names from across the world. Hit subscribe so you never miss one. The next surname was carried by a family that received 33 lordships in a single county from William's own hand. Number 6. Darcy. From Arcy in Normandy, of Arcy, the D marking a man who owned the ground he was named for. Norman Darcy is recorded as one of the most generously rewarded of the Conqueror's followers, granted no fewer than 33 lordships in Lincolnshire alone, with Naughton becoming the family seat for centuries afterward. That single fact tells you what the conquest actually was. Not a change of king, a wholesale transfer of a nation's property from one people to another, executed with paperwork. The Domesday Book records, for almost every settlement in England, who held it in 1066 and who held it in 1086. 2 columns, English name, then Norman name, page after page after page. If your name is D'Arcy, your bloodline is in the right-hand column. Number 5 is one of the great names of England, and it is a lie. The family changed it, and the name they took became a dukedom. Number 5, Mowbray. From Montbray in Normandy, Mont and Bray, the hill by the marsh. The Albini brothers came over with the conquest, and it was Nigel de Albini's descendants who took the name Mowbray, which rose to become one of the mightiest in the kingdom, Dukes of Norfolk, Earl Marshals of England, which reveals something the surname industry rarely admits. Norman family names were not fixed. They were places, and they changed when the land changed. A family could be Albini in one generation and Mowbray in the next, because that is where the estate was. Your surname is not a bloodline label. It is a real estate record. If your name is Mowbray, your bloodline renamed itself after a hill in Normandy and rode that hill to a dukedom. Number 4 is a name you have heard your whole life without ever once thinking about what it means. Number 4. Percy. From Percy-on-Ogg in Normandy. William de Percy came to England in the years just after the conquest, and the family were installed in the north, in Yorkshire, in exactly the shattered country the harrying had emptied. They became the Percys of Alnwick, Earls of Northumberland, the most powerful family in the north of England for 500 years, warden of the Scottish border, kingmakers, rebels, the family that put Henry IV on the throne, and then tried to take him off it. Shakespeare wrote Hotspur out of them. If your name is Percy, your bloodline was planted in the ashes of the north as an occupation force, and grew into the closest thing England ever had to a second crown. Number 3 sounds unmistakably English. It is not. It is French, and it means the stranger. Number 3, Lestrange, and the Martia names beside it. From the Old French estrange, the stranger, the foreigner, from the Latin extraneous. And that is what they were, and everybody knew it. Names like this were planted along the Welsh marches, the borderlands, where William installed his hardest men and gave them something no other lord in England had, near total autonomy, to conquer whatever Welsh land they could take and keep it. It was a permission slip for a private war that lasted 200 years. Castle after castle after castle went up along that border, and they are still standing. If your name is Lestrange, your bloodline was called the foreigner in the country it ruled, and it did not care, because it had a castle and a license to take more. Number 2 carries the name of the office that made the conquest permanent. Not a sword. A pen. Number 2. Chamberlain, butler, marshal, Spencer, and the household names. From the Norman French offices of the great household, the chambrelenc who kept the chamber, and therefore the treasury, the boutillier who kept the wine, the maréchal who kept the horses, the despensier who kept the stores. These sound like servants. They were not. William Marshal, born into that name a century after Hastings, became regent of England and one of the most powerful men in Europe. Because in a Norman kingdom, proximity to the king was the only currency, and the man who controlled his chamber controlled his money. The Domesday Survey itself, commissioned in 1086, was the ultimate expression of this, an administrative machine that counted every plough, every mill, every fishery, every household in England, so the crown would know exactly what it owned. No one had ever done that in Europe. If your name is Chamberlain, or Butler, or Marshal or Spencer, your bloodline did not win England with a sword. It won England with a ledger. And now, number 1. This is the name that appears on the most celebrated list in English genealogy. The Roll of Battle Abbey, the memorial of the companions of the Conqueror, said to have hung in the Abbey William, built on the very spot where Harold died. Millions of people trace their claim to it. Here is what nobody wants to say out loud. Number 1. Every name on the Roll of Battle Abbey. The original roll has been lost since at least the 16th century. Everything we have comes from 16th century copies published by Leland, Holinshed, and Duchesne, and they do not agree with each other. The longest version carries over 600 names, and some of those are duplicates. Historians have understood for a very long time that names appear to have been added over the centuries, and that getting your family's name onto the roll had considerably more to do with a donation to the abbey than with an ancestor standing in the shield wall at Hastings. And here is the number that ought to be on a monument. Out of the thousands of men who fought that day, only 15 can be named with certainty from reliable contemporary sources. 15. Scholars have argued the list up to around 21 using circumstantial evidence, and that is where honesty ends. Everything beyond that is a story a family told about itself until it became a fact. If your name is on the Battle Abbey roll, your bloodline may have stood beside William the Conqueror on the 14th of October 1066, or your ancestor may simply have been rich enough, 400 years later, to buy his way onto a list, and proud enough to make sure his grandchildren never learned the difference. 12 surnames, 12 bloodlines, 12 corridors leading back through a fleet in the Channel, a shield wall on a Sussex hill, a burned and empty north, a ledger that counted every mill in England, and a forged roll of honor that has been fooling proud families for 400 years. Your name is not just a name. It is a place in Normandy. It is a grant of land that belonged to somebody else. It is a column in a book compiled in 1086 by clerks who did not care whose grandfather had farmed it. Drop your surname in the comments and tell me which side of the shield wall you think your bloodline stood on, because most of us are descended from both. And if your family kept the story, say it, because those stories deserve to be heard. If you made it to the end of this video, Subscribe to Origins Decoded. Every week we go deeper into the history hidden inside the names people carry without knowing what they mean. The next video is already waiting for you.